Ever wondered how an angel gets their wings? Perhaps when a baby laughs for the first time, or perhaps when someone assembles IKEA furniture perfectly with no mysterious leftover screws. Well, angels and their wings are a whole nother topic for another day. But more specifically, what we're delving into is the age-old question. When were angels created? Today we're zeroing in on three key aspects of angels. First, how they experience time in a way that's completely different from ours or God's. Second, the ongoing debate over which creation day they might have first appeared. And third, why understanding their relationship to time and creation is so important for our own spiritual journey. By the end, you'll have a whole new perspective on these heavenly beings. These heavenly creatures were among God's earliest creations, existing long before humanity. Though they don't dwell on earth as we do, the Bible makes it abundantly clear that angels are deeply involved in the world, carrying out a myriad of divine tasks. From delivering messages and offering protection to executing God's will, they are portrayed as active participants in the unfolding story of creation. The origins of the angels have been a topic of heavy debate throughout history. Countless theories exist, making it impossible to pinpoint. There's no clear consensus on this one. It's like trying to figure out when people started liking pineapple on pizza. Everyone has an opinion, but no one really knows for sure. The exact timing of when angels were created is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible, and most of us would assume they were created before the physical universe, but I will present some theories that might not prove that to be so. What we do know for fact is that they were certainly created before mankind, because the first angel to get a shout-out in the Bible is none other than the infamous fallen angel, Satan in the Garden of Eden. So before humanity's first day, angels had already picked teams, Team Good Angels and Team #Fallen, but that's also another topic for another day. When opinions run wild and the crowd can't agree, it's time to bring in someone with a PhD in angel lore to answer the question. Could angels have existed from eternity, with no particular beginning? Thomas Aquinas, the renowned 13th century theologian often called the Doctor of Angels for his extensive study of these beings, was crystal clear on this point. Absolutely not. He said, "Only God is uncaused and eternal, existing without beginning or end." This stance was important because certain early sources, particularly Gnostic writings, proposed a very different idea. They claimed that angels were co-eternal with God, essentially little g gods who had always existed. In this view, Yahweh was simply the highest among them, while these so-called gods fought for power and dominion over regions. Such ideas challenged the uniqueness of God as the sole eternal being. So, were angels created? The answer, as supported by Scripture, is a resounding yes. The Bible is clear that angels are part of God's creation. Psalm 104:4 tells us that God makes his messengers winds, his ministers a flaming fire. The language here emphasizes God's role as the creator, shaping his messengers and ministers, angels, like winds and flames. They are not physical beings with corporeal bodies, but spiritual creations, formed by God's intentional design. This distinction matters because it underscores a central truth. Only God is eternal, existing without cause or beginning. Everything else, including angels, owes its existence to his creative act. For now, let's explore some metaphysical angelic philosophical theology, specifically the concept of time and how it relates to the nature of angels. Defining time, especially within the context of eternity and God's existence, is no small feat. It's a complex endeavor that stretches our understanding of reality. Theologians have developed a concept that divides time into three distinct categories. First, we have time, or tempus in Latin, where us humans exist. Second, we have eternity, or eternitas, where God exists. And third, everlastingness, or aeviternity, where angels exist. Okay, real talk. Trying to wrap my head around eternity and aeviternity nearly fried my brain. And honestly, even after hours of research and putting this video together for you, I'm still not sure I completely get it. But maybe that's the point. We live inside our own timeline, in a dimension we're wired for, one moment after another, cause and effect. So when we start asking how God exists outside of time, or how angels experience reality, it's kind of like trying to explain to a fish that water is wet. It just doesn't compute. So if this next part gets confusing, I'm sorry. We're sort of reaching beyond what humans are built to fully grasp anyway, but if it actually clicks for you, then you're doing better than me. So what is time, really? Time is characterized by change. And time began when changing creatures came into existence. It's the stage where the drama of successions plays out. A restless flow of moments shifting from what's ahead, the future, into what's now, and then slipping into what's past. Time is often described as a measure that helps us distinguish one moment from another, and provides information about the duration of events and when they occur. We mark time by observing these changes, the sun rising and setting, seasons transforming, ourselves growing older. To make sense of it all, we've built tools. We measure these shifts with clocks and calendars, slicing life into neat little boxes, seconds, minutes, hours, days, and years. It is seen as an essential aspect of our understanding of the universe and our place within it. Time is a sequence of changing moments. Imagine you have a straight line that represents time. It starts at a specific point, the beginning of the universe, and keeps going forever in one direction. On that line, you have things that are born, change, grow old, and die, like humans, animals, and plants. Or imagine you're watching a sunset. The sky blazes fiery red, softens to warm orange, then fades to dusky purple until it disappears past the horizon. This unfolding progression perfectly illustrates Aquinas' description of time as the measure of before and after in motion, a rhythm that governs everything we see, feel, and are. Now let's shift our focus a bit. Pause for a second. When you hear the word eternity, what pops into your mind? If you're like most people, you're picturing some endless stretch of time, right? Well, let's clear up a huge misconception. Many people mistakenly think of eternity as simply being a very long time that never ends. But that's not quite right. In fact, eternity isn't just time stretched to infinity. It's a realm entirely separate from time itself, where time doesn't even exist. The now of time, as we experience it, is fleeting, constantly slipping from the future into the past. But eternity? Imagine it as an infinite present, a now that never shifts, never fades, and never changes. So, when we talk about eternity, we're really not just talking about forever. We're not talking about endless time, and we're definitely not talking about a place. So, can we say eternity is God, or that God is eternity? Not quite. It sounds profound, but it's not theologically accurate. They're not synonymous. Eternity isn't what God is. It's a way of describing something about him, specifically his immutability, his complete and unchanging nature. And I think Aquinas really takes the cake on defining for this one. He said something along the lines of, time is the measure of motion and change. Eternity is the measure of permanence. In other words, eternity is a word we use to measure a being who doesn't change. Not becoming, not unfolding, just perfectly permanently existing. Pretty wild to think about, right? All right, now let's switch gears for a moment. We can't discuss eternity without discussing God, because eternity is a hallmark characteristic. To grasp eternity, then, is to understand something profound about God. It reflects his perfection, his immutability, his transcendence over the limitations of time and change that govern the created order. And if you've never heard the word immutability before, you're not alone. It basically means the absolute inability to change, since you're already perfect and whole. Now, because God isn't made of matter and form, he's free from the limitations that define created things. He doesn't grow, change, or evolve. He can't gain something new, lose what he already has, or undergo any kind of shift in his essence, will, knowledge, or actions. This unchangeability, what theologians call immutability, is a cornerstone of God's perfection. It's one of the key traits that sets him apart from everything else in existence. So you know that old Hannah Montana song, Nobody's Perfect? Well, turns out that God is the only one who is. On the flip side, all created things are defined by change. Aquinas points out that creatures like us are by their very nature mutable. Even angels experience mutability in their choices, intellect, and even location. In a world where everything seems to be in flux, God's immutability is an anchor. It also gives us something incredible: assurance. God's promises are utterly reliable, His love is constant, and His truth never wavers. It's what makes Him God, unchanging, eternal, and perfect in every way. Now let's bring it full circle. Literally, picture eternity as a perfect circle. No start, no finish. Just endless, seamless continuity. It's a beautiful symbol of God's unchanging nature, steady, unbroken, and complete. To compare to our previous sunset analogy, think of eternity as the source from which all sunsets come. While the sunset is temporary, just a brief dwindling of light, it owes its existence to something much greater, the sun itself, which continues to shine even when the sunset fades. Alright, so let's take this a step further. If eternity is the source of the sunset itself, unchanging and constant, and time is the sunset in motion, then where does everlastingness or aeviternity fit in? So think of it like that golden glow right after the sun dips below the horizon. The scene itself isn't changing in any dramatic way, but the light lingers, shifting in subtle ways, casting new hues across the sky. It's still yet not static, so aeviternity works the same way. It's this in-between state that sits between eternity and time. Angels, for example, aren't locked into time the way we are. They do experience past, present, and future in sequence, but engage with time in a way where they are not physically constrained by it, albeit through aging or death. However, they also aren't fully outside of time like God is. Instead, because of the essence in which God created them, these powerful beings were infused with knowledge at their making. Therefore, for the most part, they grasp realities instantly, rather than by learning gradually like us humans. So, we could conclude, since they are created already divinely intelligent, the moment they make a decision, they do so with complete knowledge of its consequences. And so, that brings us to something crucial: free will. Tertullian describes angels as beings with intelligence and intentionality. They're not robotic servants, they choose and they act. But here's the key difference. While humans make choices with limited foresight, learning and growing over time, angels make their decisions with full awareness from the start. That's why their choices are irreversible. There's no learning from mistakes, no second chances. That's why Lucifer's fall wasn't a moment of confusion or regret. It was a fully conscious act with crystal clear understanding of its consequences. So, in a way, the time plane angels exist in, this ever-eternal state, is exactly what makes their choices so absolute. Unlike us, bound by time and learning as we go, angels act with fixed clarity. And once they choose, there's no going back. Now that we've explored the unique plane of existence angels inhabit, it's time to tackle another question. When were angels actually created? Were they present from the very beginning, before the universe itself? Or did they appear somewhere along the way? Let's dive into the timeline of their creation and see what scripture and tradition suggest about their role in God's grand design. So Jerome, a 4th century theologian who translated the Bible into Latin, which is the Catholic Church's official Bible to this day, said something along the lines of, "Hold on, let's get this straight. Angels existed before the heavens and earth. They were there, hanging out with the big guy upstairs, like the VIP guests before the main party. We can gather from the Bible that a function of angels is to worship God around his throne, which implies they may have been in existence for millions of years. And in 2 Peter 3:8, it is mentioned that, with the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. This passage is often interpreted as meaning that God is very, very old, and so who knows how long angels have been around before God got to creating the universe. However, others thought angels were created before the visible world, like before all the earthly stuff happened. They believed there was an invisible creation first, and then the visible creation followed. Scholars like Gregory of Nazianzus and John of Damascus were on that side of the debate, but then there were those genius no-nonsense minds like Theodore who said, "Who cares when the angels were created, really? Let's focus on what the scriptures actually tell us, like important things of morals, faith, and righteous living. No need to play Sherlock Holmes and go beyond what God hasn't revealed to us. And yeah, I guess he's right. Honestly, the scriptures aren't dropping any specific dates, leaving us in a guessing game, so truthfully, that might be the right attitude. We just don't have all the answers about angels, and going beyond what is in the scriptures could be a slippery slope of pure speculation. So I guess we should call it a day and let our curiosity die with us. But what's the fun in that? So I digress. Here's another theory that the angels were created on one of the 7 days of the creation account. According to Genesis, we know that the world was created in 7 days, or technically 6 days since God rested on the 7th day. Traditionally, angels are believed to have been created before the world, as they are described as witnesses to creation. However, it is also possible that they were created during the process of creation, meaning they were created during the creation of creation. Augustine and Epiphanius were among those who supported this view, pointing to Genesis 2, which mentions the heavens and the earth and all their vast array. Furthermore, Exodus 20:11 states, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day." This could be evidence that all things, including heavenly spirits like angels, were created within the 6-day period. So angels? Oh, they were just part of the cosmic to-do list. Day 1, light. Day 2, sky. Day 3, land and seas. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, Starbucks for everyone. Day 6, oh, almost forgot, let's whip up some angels before the weekend. Just kidding. While it's fun to imagine angels as the last-minute addition to God's creation spree, the reality is likely more complex and certainly more profound. Now, the mystery of when angels were created, according to the Bible, is a bit like trying to solve a divine puzzle with pieces scattered across different scriptures. There are intriguing phrases in the Bible about things existing before the world, which are found in passages like Psalm 90, Proverbs 8, and John 1. These references are intriguing but somewhat enigmatic, leading to diverse interpretations among scholars. So now you know the period of time angels could have been created. Now, we're going to do some more Sherlock Holming and find the exact day angels were created. Firstly, let's consider the first day out of the 6. The greatest evidence of this is in Job 38. God appears as a whirlwind to Job and poses a series of rhetorical questions. These questions challenge him to consider the grandeur and complexity of creation by recalling on those primordial times. He asks Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone when the angels sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" So picture this. God speaks. Some crazy cool stuff is going on, and the sons of God, or angels, are there, shining like morning stars, belting out a cosmic harmony that would put any choir to shame. Can you imagine the divine symphony echoing throughout the celestial realms? So, while God was busy crafting the universe, the angelic crew was there. It's like the angels had an ultimate backstage pass to the creation of the universe. They were shouting with joy like they knew they were part of something truly magnificent. The key detail we should notice, however, is the linking between God laying the foundations of the earth and the angels already being created. During this grand cosmic debut, the earth and humans weren't even on the scene yet, so we can assume that the angels were created on day 1 of 6. But just when you think you've got the timeline figured out, there's a twist. This next biblical detail might flip the script. What if angels actually got their wings on day 2? Now take a look at this. You may have noticed that at the end of each creation day, there's that familiar line, "God saw that it was good." But curiously, that line is missing from the day 2 recap. The phrase, "God saw that it was good," is like a stamp of approval from God that reflects the beauty, harmony, and completeness of each act of creation. The repetition of this phrase throughout the Genesis account adds a rhythm to the story. It reassures us, as readers, that everything is unfolding exactly as it should, according to God's perfect plan. It's there at the end of days 1, 3, 4, 5. Basically every day except day 2. So what was happening on this day? On day 2, God's busy splitting the waters with a sky-high separator called the firmament, calling the area above Heaven. And guess who lives in heaven? Yep, our feathery friends, the angels. Maybe this was their move-in day. This could also indicate when the possible fall of angels occurred. You know, when Lucifer falls like lightning from heaven and a supposed third of the angels are fallen with him. This silence has led some scholars to think that day 2 was the celestial equivalent of a bad hair day, to put it lightly. Now, you've probably already guessed where the next theory is headed. What about day 3? Some theologians suggest angels were created on the 3rd day of the creation story. Why? Because it fits this divine pattern. First, God creates a space, and then he fills it with life. It's kind of like building a house and then moving the family in. This idea ties in neatly with Colossians 1, a verse that kind of outlines the master plan of creation. It says, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him." It's like Christ had a universal shopping list, and he checked off every item, including things we can see, like mountains and meadows, and things we can't, like, presumably, angels. So if we extend this celestial logic, it paints a beautiful parallel. Just as God created the seas and skies and then filled them with fish and birds, he may have done the same with heaven. On day 2, God fashioned the heavens, and then on day 3, he welcomed its inhabitants, the angels. It's a fascinating thought that just as the physical world was carefully prepared for its creatures, the spiritual realm was made ready for its celestial beings. This pattern reflects not just God's creative power, but also his intention and care in every step of his work. So why does any of this angel timeline detective work matter? Why bother tracing when angels got their wings, or wrapping our heads around the concept of aeviternity? Is this just theological trivia, or is there something deeper going on? Actually, it points to something massive about who we are and how we fit into the cosmic story. See, angels are mind-blowing beings. They're powerful, immortal in their own right, and intimately involved in God's work. They were present when the foundations of the earth were laid. They serve as messengers, warriors, worshippers, spiritual forces that exist in a realm far beyond ours. And yet, God didn't make them in his image. He made us. That's not a small detail. Humanity alone is called God's image bearers. That means our experience, our timeline filled with pain, beauty, questions, and longing, is not random. It's personal. It's intentional. Angels might dwell in aeviternity, experiencing existence outside our linear past, present, future, but even they marvel at the story of grace playing out in our lives. And get this, they're learning from us. Unlike angels, we live in time, with all its mess, unpredictability, and second chances. Angels don't get do-overs. Their decisions are final. Ours? Covered in mercy. That's why Hebrews 2:16 says Jesus didn't come to help angels, he came to help us. We are the ones caught up in a redemption narrative so profound that even eternal beings are peering in, captivated. So when we explore the mystery of when angels were created, how they experience time, or what their nature says about morality, we're not just speculating. We're stepping into a bigger story. Understanding angels doesn't just teach us about them, it teaches us, about the sacredness of our own story, about a God who writes names in books before the universe came into existence, crafts timelines with care, and chooses to dwell with fragile creatures like you and me. If you enjoyed watching, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Until next time, this is Eli, your guide through the realm of angelology.